The sledgehammer struck concrete with a sound that echoed through the abandoned tunnel like a gunshot. Dust exploded into the air, thick and choking, as construction worker Marcus Hayes stepped back from the wall he'd just broken through. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness beyond, revealing something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. There, arranged side by side in perfect rows, lay 4 skeletal figures, still dressed in navy blue uniforms. Golden wings pinned to their chests caught his light and glinted like dying stars. Marcus's hand trembled as his radio crackled to life, but he couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. Because these women had been missing for 26 years. 4 flight attendants who had walked into Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport on a cold November night in 1992 and simply vanished without a trace. No witnesses. No evidence. No bodies. Until today, March 12, 2018, when a construction project broke through a sealed maintenance tunnel and exposed a secret that someone had kept hidden for over 2 decades. A secret that would unravel one of the most disturbing cases of obsession and murder in aviation history. A secret that involved not just 4 victims, but a 5th person who had been living in captivity her entire life, never knowing her own mother had been murdered just moments after giving her life. If you're drawn to mysteries that expose the darkest corners of human nature and the resilience of those who survive them, subscribe to Ultimate Crime Stories. Because some truths stay buried for decades, waiting for just the right moment to surface and demand justice. November 14, 1992. Terminal C of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport hummed with the quiet energy of late evening operations. The fluorescent lights cast their sterile glow across polished floors as travelers hurried to catch red-eye flights to distant cities. In the crew lounge tucked away from the passenger terminals, Jennifer Morrison checked her reflection one last time. She was 31 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in the regulation bun required by American skyways. The navy blue uniform jacket fit perfectly after 8 years of wearing it. She adjusted the golden wings pinned above her heart, a symbol she'd earned and worn with pride. Tonight's flight to Seattle would be routine. Just another red-eye departure at 11:30, just another Boeing 757 waiting at gate C-47. Nothing special. Nothing to worry about. She had no way of knowing she would never board that plane. The lounge door opened and Lisa Chen walked in, blonde hair still damp from the shower she'd taken at home before her shift. 26 years old and full of the kind of warmth that made nervous passengers relax the moment she smiled at them. She was Jennifer's closest friend among the crew, the person she confided in about everything from relationship troubles to dreams of buying her first house. They'd flown together dozens of times, had developed the kind of easy rhythm that made long flights bearable. As ready as I'll ever be for a midnight departure, Jennifer said, slipping her compact into her overnight bag. The click of heels on tile announced the arrival of Maria Santos, 29, her dark hair styled in the sleek bun she could create in under 2 minutes. She carried a thermos of coffee, knowing she'd need the caffeine for the 6-hour flight ahead. Behind her came the youngest member of their crew, 23-year-old Rebecca Walsh. Rebecca was new enough that she still double-checked her safety manual before every flight, still felt a flutter of nerves during boarding. She carried that manual now, gripping it like a security blanket. Flight 447 crew reporting for duty, Maria announced with mock formality, raising her thermos in salute. They had 40 minutes before boarding would begin. The plan was simple and familiar. Review the passenger manifest, check their emergency equipment, grab something to eat, then head down to the gate where ground crew would be preparing their aircraft. It was a routine they'd all performed hundreds of times. But tonight, something would go catastrophically wrong. Jennifer gathered her rolling suitcase and led the group toward the door. Let's get the equipment check done early. I want to grab a sandwich before we board. The 4 women walked together down the wide corridor, their heels clicking in rhythm against the floor. At this hour, the terminal was quieter. Fewer travelers. Fewer staff members. Their footsteps echoed in the vast space as they made their way toward the service elevator that would take them to the lower level where ground crew maintained their equipment and supplies. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. All 4 women stepped inside, and Lisa pressed the button for the lower level. As the doors slid closed, none of them noticed the man watching from behind a maintenance cart 30 feet away. He wore stained coveralls with a Dallas-Fort Worth Airport patch on the chest. His eyes tracked their descent with an intensity that would have terrified them if they'd seen it. But they didn't see him. They were laughing about something Rebecca had said, still caught up in the normalcy of their evening. The elevator descended into darkness. And Jennifer Morrison, Lisa Chen, Maria Santos, and Rebecca Walsh were never seen alive again. When morning sunlight broke across the suburbs of Fort Worth on November 15, 1992, Catherine Morrison woke to a phone ringing insistently in the kitchen. She was 19 years old, home from college for the weekend, still groggy with sleep as she stumbled down the hallway of her parents' house. The clock on the wall showed 6:15 in the morning. Way too early for anyone to be calling unless something was wrong. The voice on the other end belonged to her father, calling from his office downtown. "Have you heard from your sister?" Catherine's stomach dropped. "No. Why?" "She didn't come home last night. Her supervisor from American Skyways just called. Jennifer never showed up for her flight. They can't reach her." Catherine's hand tightened on the phone. That's not like her. Jennifer never missed flights. Never ignored calls. She was the responsible one, the older sister who had everything together, who called their parents every Sunday without fail, who sent postcards from every city she visited. "I'm calling the police," her father said. "But I wanted to check with you first. See if maybe she'd mentioned any plans." But Jennifer hadn't mentioned anything unusual. Their last conversation had been the evening before, around 6 o'clock. Jennifer had called from her apartment in Arlington, getting ready for her shift. She'd sounded tired but happy, talking about maybe taking time off around Christmas, visiting their parents in their hometown of Denton. She'd ended the call the way she always did. "Love you, Katie. See you soon." Those were the last words Catherine Morrison would ever hear her sister speak. By noon on November 15th, 4 families were making frantic phone calls. The Chens, the Santos family, the Walshs, all trying to reach daughters who had simply vanished. Lisa Chen's younger sister Rachel was calling every hospital in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Maria's fiancé David Torres was driving to the airport, demanding answers. Rebecca's parents were already in their car, making the 2-hour drive from Houston, convinced something terrible had happened to their baby girl. The initial police response was measured. Adults went missing all the time. 4 employed women with access to money and transportation. The responding officers assumed it would resolve itself. Maybe they'd gone out after work. Maybe there was a personal emergency. Maybe they'd simply decided to miss their shift. It wasn't treated as a critical missing persons case for almost 48 hours. By the time anyone realized something was seriously wrong, crucial evidence had already been lost. Security camera tapes had been recycled. Witnesses had gone home and forgotten details. The trail had gone cold before anyone even knew to look for it. Enter Captain Frank Morrison of the airport police. No relation to Jennifer Morrison, though that coincidence would haunt him for decades. He was 34 years old in 1992, a detective with the airport division who specialized in theft and fraud cases. This was his first major missing persons investigation. It would become the case that defined and destroyed his career. Captain Morrison interviewed everyone who'd been on duty the night of November 14th. Gate crew who'd waited for the 4 flight attendants to show up. Security guards who'd been patrolling the terminals. Maintenance workers who'd been cleaning floors and fixing equipment. Including a quiet man named Gerald Hoffman, age 28, who worked the night shift in terminal maintenance. Hoffman had been on duty that night. His assignment had been electrical systems inspection in the lower levels. The same lower levels where the 4 women had been heading when they disappeared. When Captain Morrison interviewed him on November 16th, Hoffman seemed shocked by the news. Cooperative. Concerned. He said he'd been working alone in the maintenance tunnels most of the night, hadn't seen the flight attendants, hadn't heard anything unusual. He had no alibi. But he also had no connection to the victims. No motive. No suspicious behavior. His supervisor said he was reliable, quiet, kept to himself but did good work. There was no physical evidence linking him to anything. So Captain Morrison thanked him for his time and moved on to other leads. That decision would haunt him for 26 years. The media descended on the story within days. 4 beautiful young women vanishing from one of the busiest airports in the country made national news. The headlines grew increasingly sensational. Mystery deepens in flight attendant disappearances. No clues in vanishing of 4 airline workers. Were they kidnapped? Did they run away together? The families held press conferences. Catherine Morrison stood beside her parents, 19 years old and terrified, pleading for anyone with information to come forward. Rachel Chen broke down on camera, sobbing that her sister would never just leave without telling anyone. David Torres offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to Maria's whereabouts. Rebecca Walsh's parents, gray-faced with grief, said their daughter had been 3 months pregnant. She was excited about becoming a mother. She would never abandon her baby. But weeks turned to months. The investigation stalled. Captain Morrison followed every lead, no matter how slim. Checked every Jane Doe report in every hospital and morgue within 200 miles. Interviewed ex-boyfriends, distant relatives, casual acquaintances. Found nothing. The FBI got involved, bringing resources and expertise, but they found nothing either. The 4 women had simply vanished as if they'd never existed. Theories proliferated. Some people thought they'd witnessed a crime and been silenced. Others suggested they'd been trafficking victims, sold into slavery overseas. The conspiracy theorists claimed government cover-ups or alien abductions. The media eventually moved on to other stories. But the families never stopped searching. Catherine Morrison spent her early 20s consumed by the mystery of her sister's disappearance. She graduated from college, but couldn't celebrate. Got her first job at an accounting firm, but couldn't focus. Every missing person report, every unidentified body, every tip or rumor sent her spiraling back into the search. She joined support groups for families of missing persons. Created a website dedicated to the case, posting photos and timelines and desperate pleas for information. Every November 14th, she organized a memorial vigil at the airport, standing in Terminal C with candles and photos, refusing to let the world forget. Rachel Chen struggled with depression for years. The not knowing was worse than death. At least death provided closure, answers, the ability to grieve and eventually heal. But this limbo was torture. Her sister might be alive somewhere, suffering, needing help. Or she might have been dead since that first night. Rachel had no way to know. David Torres never married Maria Santos. He kept her engagement ring in his bedside drawer and wore his own ring on a chain around his neck. He'd been planning their wedding for June of 1993. Had picked out a venue, chosen a band, tasted cake samples. Instead of a wedding, he attended endless police briefings and false hope meetings. He aged 20 years in the first 5. Rebecca Walsh's parents divorced 3 years after their daughter disappeared. The strain was too much for their marriage. Her mother moved to Oregon, unable to bear living in Texas anymore. Her father stayed in Houston, keeping Rebecca's childhood bedroom exactly as she'd left it, convinced she'd come home someday. And Captain Frank Morrison requested a cold case review every single year. Every year the department told him they didn't have the resources. Every year he pulled out the files anyway, went through them again, looking for something he'd missed. The case file sat on his desk like an accusation. He'd failed those 4 women, failed their families, let a murderer walk away. Because somewhere in his gut, he'd always known they were dead. Known this wasn't a voluntary disappearance or trafficking case. Someone had killed them. Someone had hidden them. Someone was still out there. And for 26 years, that someone got away with it. Until March 12, 2018, when Marcus Hayes swung a sledgehammer into a concrete wall and everything changed. But before we get to that moment, you need to understand what those 26 years did to the people left behind. Catherine Morrison was 45 years old in 2018. She'd built a life, such as it was. The accounting job had become a career. She'd married briefly in her 30s, divorced amicably when her husband admitted he couldn't compete with a ghost. She'd watched her parents age under the weight of unanswered questions. Her father developed heart problems. Her mother's hair went white almost overnight. In December of 2017, her mother passed away. Pneumonia, officially, but Catherine knew the truth. Her mother had died of a broken heart, never learning what happened to her eldest daughter. Catherine inherited boxes of investigation materials, newspaper clippings, police reports, private investigator files, photos of Jennifer at every age. She couldn't bring herself to throw any of it away, but she also couldn't keep looking at it. So the boxes sat in her garage, monuments to the sister she'd lost and the answers she'd never found. Until the phone rang on March 15, 2018, at 7 in the morning. Catherine Morrison had learned to dread early morning phone calls. Nothing good ever came from them. But when she saw the caller ID showed Dallas-Fort Worth Airport Police, her heart lurched with a feeling she barely recognized. Hope. Mrs. Morrison, this is Detective Sandra Briggs with the Airport Police. I'm calling because we've had a significant development in your sister's case. Catherine's breath caught. In 26 years, she'd received dozens of calls about developments. Tips that led nowhere. Possible sightings that evaporated under scrutiny. Theories that collapsed under investigation. She'd learned to armor herself against hope. What kind of development? We'd prefer to discuss this in person. Would you be able to come to the airport today? I know this is sudden, but the situation is time-sensitive. Time-sensitive. After 26 years, suddenly something was time-sensitive. Catherine checked the clock. It was barely 7 in the morning on a Thursday. She had work, obligations, a life that demanded her attention. But none of that mattered. Not when someone was calling about Jennifer. I can be there by 10. The drive to Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport took 50 minutes through morning traffic. Catherine hadn't been to the airport in years. After her mother's death, she'd stopped organizing the annual vigils. Stopped visiting the place where Jennifer had last been seen. It hurt too much to stand in those terminals knowing her sister had walked those same floors, breathed that same recycled air, never suspecting she had only minutes left to live. But today she drove through the massive complex of runways and terminals with a strange sense of purpose. Whatever Detective Briggs wanted to tell her, it was important enough to call at 7 in the morning. Important enough to request an in-person meeting. Important enough to be time-sensitive after 26 years. Airport Police Headquarters occupied a nondescript building adjacent to Terminal A. Catherine parked in the visitor lot and made her way inside, giving her name to the officer at the front desk. Within minutes, a woman approached. Mid-40s, short gray hair, sharp intelligent eyes that had clearly seen too much. Detective Sandra Briggs. She extended her hand. Thank you for coming so quickly. She led Catherine down a corridor to a small conference room where another person waited. A man, older, perhaps 60, with a weathered face and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in law enforcement. Captain Frank Morrison. Catherine recognized him instantly even though 26 years had passed since she'd last seen him. He'd been the lead investigator in 1992. The one who'd promised her family they'd find answers. The one who'd failed. You remember, he said quietly, extending his hand. I remember all 4 of them. That case has haunted me for 26 years. Catherine shook his hand, noting the sadness in his expression, the guilt he still carried. Please sit down, Detective Briggs said. They settled around the conference table. The detective opened a folder, but didn't immediately reference its contents. Instead, she looked directly at Catherine. 3 days ago, a construction crew was doing renovation work in the lower levels of Terminal C. They were updating electrical systems in some of the older maintenance corridors. Areas that haven't been accessed in years, some of them sealed off when the airport expanded in the late 90s. Catherine's hands gripped the armrests of her chair. When they broke through a wall into an abandoned service tunnel, they found something. 4 sets of skeletal remains. The room tilted. Catherine heard a sound escape her throat, something between a gasp and a sob. 26 years of wondering, hoping, fearing, and here was the answer delivered in one brutal sentence. 4 sets of skeletal remains. We haven't made a formal identification yet, Captain Morrison said gently. But the remains were found with personal effects. Airline uniforms. Employee badges. Preliminary forensic analysis suggests the remains have been there for approximately 25 to 30 years. Detective Briggs slid several photographs across the table. Catherine's hands shook as she picked them up. The images showed corroded metal badges, scraps of navy blue fabric, the unmistakable shape of golden wings. One photo showed a badge more clearly than the others. Catherine could just make out the engraved name. J. Morrison. Oh God, Catherine whispered. Oh God, Jennifer. Detective Briggs reached across the table, not quite touching Catherine's hand but hovering nearby. I'm so sorry. We'll need DNA confirmation, of course. But given the location and the evidence, we believe these are your sister and her crew. Catherine couldn't breathe. 26 years of not knowing, of hoping against hope that maybe Jennifer was alive somewhere. Had amnesia. Had started a new life. Had been kidnapped but survived. All those desperate fantasies shattered by the reality of bones in a sealed tunnel. How did they die? The question came out as barely more than a whisper. The two investigators exchanged a glance. Captain Morrison cleared his throat. The medical examiner is still conducting the full analysis. But there are indicators of trauma to the skeletal remains. This wasn't an accident, Mrs. Morrison. We're treating this as a homicide investigation. Homicide. Murder. All four of them murdered and hidden in a sealed tunnel for over 2 decades. Someone had killed her sister. Someone had taken Jennifer's life and then hidden the evidence so thoroughly it took 26 years and a construction accident to find it. We need your help, Detective Briggs said. You were closely involved in the original investigation. You knew your sister's routines, her life. We're reopening this case with fresh eyes and anything you can tell us might be crucial. Catherine wiped her eyes, forcing herself to focus. If they'd finally found Jennifer, if they finally had a chance to learn the truth and bring her killer to justice, then Catherine would give them everything she had. What do you need to know? They talked for over an hour. Detective Briggs asked detailed questions about Jennifer's habits, her relationships, her life in the months before she disappeared. Captain Morrison occasionally interjected with questions that revealed just how thoroughly he'd studied the original case, how much it had stayed with him through the years. Catherine told them everything she could remember. The last phone call at 6 o'clock on November 14th. Jennifer's voice tired but happy. Her plans to save money for a house. Her dreams of taking time off at Christmas. Nothing unusual. Nothing that suggested she knew she was in danger. Did she ever mention feeling uncomfortable at work? Detective Briggs asked. Anyone who made her uneasy? Catherine thought carefully, reaching back through decades of memory. She complained once about a maintenance worker who kept showing up wherever she was. She thought it was coincidence at first, but it happened several times in 1 week. She mentioned it to her supervisor. When was this? Maybe a month before she disappeared. She said the supervisor talked to the worker, and it stopped. She felt bad about reporting him, because she thought maybe he was just lonely. Detective Briggs made careful notes. Did she tell you the worker's name? Catherine shook her head. Just that he was older, kind of quiet. She felt guilty for causing trouble for him. After Catherine left with a promise to provide DNA samples for comparison, Detective Briggs turned to Captain Morrison. Tell me you still have the personnel records from November 1992. Every single page, Morrison said. They are in storage, but I can have them here by tomorrow morning. They spent the next 2 days assembling a task force. Detective Raymond Chen, no relation to Lisa Chen, from the Cold Case Unit. A forensic anthropologist named Dr. Helen Vasquez, who specialized in analyzing remains from historical crime scenes. A technical analyst who would handle computer forensics and data recovery. And on March 17, 2018, they gathered in a conference room at Airport Police Headquarters for their first full briefing. Dr. Vasquez pulled up photographs on the projection screen. What we have is both more and less than you might expect. The tunnel where the remains were discovered is part of the airport's original infrastructure, built in 1974. It was used for maintenance access to electrical and HVAC systems. In 1998, during a major terminal expansion, this entire section was deemed obsolete. Rather than tear it out, they simply sealed it off. The entrance was covered by new construction, essentially creating a tomb. So whoever put the bodies there knew the tunnel was going to be sealed, Detective Chen suggested. Not necessarily, Dr. Vasquez replied. The sealing happened 6 years after the murders. But whoever hid the bodies chose a location that was already rarely accessed. The tunnel's entrance in 1992 would have been through a maintenance area that was typically locked, only used by specific personnel. She clicked to the next image showing photographs of where Marcus Hayes had made his grim discovery. The remains were found in what appears to be a storage alcove approximately 80 feet from the tunnel's original entrance. They were positioned deliberately, laid out side by side. Not dumped. Not hidden hastily. Arranged with what might have been care or respect. 3 of the 4 victims show clear evidence of blunt force trauma to the skull. The injuries are consistent with being struck multiple times with a heavy object, something like a pipe or crowbar. The 4th victim shows different trauma patterns. Dr. Vasquez paused. The 4th victim's hyoid bone is fractured. That's a small bone in the throat. A fracture that typically indicates manual strangulation. Based on the position of the remains and the personal effects found nearby, we believe the strangulation victim was Rebecca Walsh, the youngest of the 4. Detective Briggs felt cold weight settle in her stomach. So we're looking at someone who bludgeoned 3 victims to death and strangled one. Why the different method? Dr. Vasquez shrugged. It could indicate escalation or de-escalation depending on the sequence. It could suggest a different emotional state or relationship with that particular victim. Or it could simply be opportunistic, based on what was available at the moment. They reviewed the forensic evidence in detail. Hair samples that didn't match the victims. Fingerprints preserved on metal surfaces in the tunnel's dry environment. Fabric fibers caught on exposed conduit, suggesting the bodies had been dragged or moved. Trace evidence that was still being analyzed. Captain Morrison pulled out yellowed file folders, the original investigation materials he'd kept for 26 years. According to the records from 92, maintenance tunnel access was restricted to 3 groups. Airport maintenance staff, airline ground crew supervisors, airport security personnel. All required key card access. How many people total are we talking about? Detective Briggs asked. Morrison flipped through pages. Approximately 200 people had some level of maintenance access throughout the airport. Specific access to Terminal C lower-level tunnels was more restricted. About 40 people. Do we have names? We have the personnel list from 1992, Morrison said. But that's 26 years ago. People have retired, moved away, died. We're going to have to track down as many as we can. That became the task force's first priority. Locate everyone who'd had access to those tunnels in November of 1992. Interview them. Build timelines. Look for inconsistencies. It was tedious work made harder by the passage of time. Some people couldn't be found. Others had died. Many couldn't remember details from a random night 26 years earlier. But slowly, painstakingly, they built a picture of who had been in the airport that night and where they might have been. One name kept appearing in the records. Gerald Hoffman, age 54 in 2018. Currently head of Terminal C maintenance operations. He'd been working at the airport since 1988. A junior maintenance technician in 1992. And according to the duty roster from November 14th, he'd been assigned to electrical systems inspection in the lower levels that night. The same lower levels where 4 women had disappeared. The same tunnels where their bodies had been hidden. Captain Morrison pulled out the interview notes from 1992. I remember him. Quiet guy. Seemed genuinely shocked when I told him about the disappearances. Said he was working alone in the sublevels most of the night, hadn't seen anything unusual. No alibi but also no evidence against him. We cleared him and moved on. But now, 26 years later, Gerald Hoffman had ordered the construction project that led to discovering the bodies. He'd been the one to direct the crew to that specific section of tunnel. He'd known exactly where they'd find the remains because he was the one who'd put them there. But they couldn't prove it yet. Not definitively. Not in a way that would hold up in court. They needed more evidence. They needed to catch him making a mistake. And then, on March 20th, Dr. Vasquez called Detective Briggs with urgent news. You need to come to the tunnel. Right now. We found something else. Detective Briggs made her way through Terminal C, past the normal bustle of travelers and airport staff, down service elevators and through security checkpoints until she reached the construction barriers that still blocked off the sealed section. Dr. Vasquez waited there, her expression grim. I wanted you to see this before I included it in my official report. They ducked under caution tape and entered the rough opening that had been sledgehammered through the concrete wall. The tunnel beyond was narrow, lined with exposed pipes and electrical conduits. Emergency work lights strung along the ceiling cast harsh shadows. Dr. Vasquez led Detective Briggs past the alcove where the remains had been found, past the chalk outlines that marked where each victim had lain, to a junction where the tunnel branched in 2 directions. The left branch was sealed with concrete. The right branch continued for about 20 feet, before ending at a metal door, rusted and covered in decades of grime. We didn't notice this door initially because of the rust and poor lighting. But when we were collecting evidence samples, someone found it. Dr. Vasquez approached the door and shone her flashlight on the handle. Detective Briggs leaned closer and saw what had caught the forensic anthropologist's attention. Scratches around the lock. Fresh scratches that had scraped away rust to reveal clean metal underneath. Someone opened this door recently, Detective Briggs said. Within the last few weeks, I'd estimate. Before the construction crew broke through the wall. Dr. Vasquez pulled out a key ring provided by airport maintenance. The lock was old but functional. The door swung inward with a screech of protesting hinges. Beyond lay a small room, maybe 10 feet square. It had clearly been used for storage at some point. Metal shelving units lined the walls, most of them empty and rusted. But what drew Detective Briggs's attention was a corner of the room where a folding camping chair sat facing the wall. And on that wall, someone had arranged photographs. Dozens of them. Pinned to the concrete with thumbtacks. Detective Briggs stepped closer, her skin crawling as the images came into focus. Newspaper clippings, yellowed with age, showing the full flight attendants. Headlines screaming about the mysterious disappearance. Articles about the failed investigation. Photos of grieving family members. But mixed among the news clippings were other photographs. Personal ones. Surveillance photos. Jennifer Morrison at a restaurant, laughing with friends. Lisa Chen at a shopping mall, carrying bags. Maria Santos leaving her apartment building. Rebecca Walsh at what looked like a family gathering. All taken without their knowledge. All documenting their lives in the weeks before they died. These are surveillance photos, Detective Briggs said. Someone was stalking them before they disappeared. Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. And there's more. She pointed to the bottom row of photographs. These were recent. The paper still white, the images in color rather than faded tones. They showed Catherine Morrison leaving her house. Rachel Chen walking through a parking lot. David Torres at a gas station. Other people Detective Briggs didn't recognize. He's been coming back here, Detective Briggs whispered. All these years, he's been coming back to this room. On the floor beneath the camping chair lay a spiral notebook. Dr. Vasquez had already photographed it in place, so she carefully picked it up and handed it to Detective Briggs. The detective opened the notebook with gloved hands. The pages were filled with handwritten entries, dated and detailed. The earliest entry was from April 1993, 5 months after the murders. Returned today. Everything remains undisturbed. They are sleeping peacefully. I sat with them for an hour, explaining again why it had to happen this way. Jay still doesn't understand, but she will in time. Detective Briggs felt ice forming in her stomach. She flipped through more pages. The writer had visited the tunnel regularly over the years. Sometimes monthly. Sometimes with gaps of a year or more. He wrote about the victims, as though they were still alive. As though they could hear him. November 14th, 1994. 2 years today. Brought flowers, but there's no place to put them down here. Elle would have liked yellow roses. She always wore a yellow scarf on Tuesdays. I remember everything about her. Everything. The entries continued through the years, showing a deeply fractured mind. Sometimes expressing remorse. Sometimes justification. Sometimes mundane details about his daily life, as though journaling to friends. The most recent entry was dated March 10, 2018. Just 2 days before the construction crew broke through the wall. They are going to tear down this section. I heard the foreman talking about it. I have to move my things, but I can't move them. They've been here so long. This is where they belong. I failed them again, just like I failed them that night when everything went wrong. We need to process every inch of this room, Detective Briggs said. Fingerprints, DNA, anything that can tell us who's been here. Already in progress, Dr. Vasquez replied. I have a team coming within the hour. But there's one more thing. She led Detective Briggs to the far corner where one of the metal shelving units stood. On the bottom shelf, partially hidden behind a rusted toolbox, sat a small wooden box. Dr. Vasquez opened it carefully. Inside were 4 items, each wrapped in plastic. A woman's wristwatch. A small gold necklace with a cross pendant. A pearl earring. A class ring. Trophies, Detective Briggs said. Personal effects taken from the victims. We'll need the families to identify them, but I bet anything these belong to the full flight attendants. Detective Briggs stared at the items, thinking about what they represented. A killer who had not only murdered 4 women, but maintained a relationship with their bodies for over 2 decades. Who had stolen pieces of them to keep as mementos. Who had photographed their families, suggesting an ongoing obsession that extended beyond death. This changes everything. This isn't just a cold case anymore. We're dealing with someone who's active. Who's been active this whole time. Those recent photographs suggest he's choosing new victims, Dr. Vasquez finished quietly. Detective Briggs pulled out her phone and called Captain Morrison. We need protection on the families immediately. Catherine Morrison, Rachel Chen, David Torres. Anyone connected to the victims. And we need to find out everyone who's had access to this section of the airport in the last month. She listened to his response, then added, there's a room down here. A shrine. He's been coming back for 26 years. And based on what we found, I think he's planning to kill again. Over the next 48 hours, the investigation intensified. The forensics team processed the shrine room, collecting fingerprints, hair samples, fiber evidence. Everything was photographed, catalogued, preserved. The notebook was analyzed for handwriting characteristics and psychological profiling. The photographs were traced to determine when and where they'd been taken. And on March 22nd, the results came back. Multiple fingerprints recovered from the shrine room. Most degraded by time and humidity, but several clear prints from the notebook and the wooden box containing the trophies. They ran them through AFIS, the Automated Fingerprint Identification System, and got a hit. Gerald Hoffman, age 54. Airport security clearance on file from background checks. His prints were all over that room. Detective Briggs stood in the task force briefing room, looking at Gerald Hoffman's employee photo on the projection screen. Unremarkable face. Thinning gray hair. Wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like someone's grandfather. Like the kind of guy who'd help you change a tire or give directions without being asked. Nothing about his appearance suggested he was a serial killer who'd maintained a shrine to his victims for 26 years. We have his fingerprints in the shrine room, Detective Chen said. We can bring him in. Not yet, Detective Briggs replied. We have his prints in a room, but we need to connect him directly to the murders. A defense attorney could argue he found the bodies years after they were killed and created the shrine out of twisted grief. We need more. So what do? We make him nervous. Make him think we're getting close. See how he reacts. They put 24-hour surveillance on Gerald Hoffman. Unmarked cars followed him from his modest house in Euless to the airport and back. Plainclothes officers watched him at work, documenting his movements. They pulled his complete employment history, looking for patterns. And found something disturbing. In 1998, when the tunnel section had been sealed off during the terminal expansion, Hoffman had taken a 2-week vacation. Unusual for him. He rarely took more than a few days off at a time. In 2003, just before his promotion to head of maintenance, there had been another missing persons case at the airport. A female janitor named Patricia Green had vanished without a trace. 28 years old. Never found. Case never solved. Pull everything on that case, Detective Briggs ordered. I want to know if Hoffman was working the night she disappeared. The answer came back within hours. Yes. Gerald Hoffman had been on duty. No alibi. Never considered a serious suspect because there was no evidence. The same pattern repeating. For 3 days, the surveillance teams reported nothing unusual. Hoffman worked his normal shifts, ate lunch in the employee cafeteria, went home at the end of the day. But on March 25th, something changed. At 3 in the afternoon, Hoffman left his office and took a service elevator down to the lower levels. He's heading toward the tunnel area, the surveillance officer radioed. Detective Briggs grabbed a jacket. I'm going down there. Keep him under observation, but don't approach. She made her way through the airport to the construction area in Terminal C. The tunnel entrance had been resealed with temporary barriers after the forensics team finished processing the scene. She positioned herself in a maintenance corridor with a clear view. After 10 minutes, she saw him. Gerald Hoffman approached the barriers, looked around to ensure he was alone, then moved one of the barriers aside. He slipped through the opening and disappeared into the tunnel. Detective Briggs waited, her heart pounding. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then Hoffman emerged, his face pale, his hands shaking. He carefully repositioned the barrier and walked quickly back toward the elevator. She didn't confront him, didn't reveal her presence. Instead, she waited until he was gone, then entered the tunnel herself. Made her way past the alcove where the bodies had been discovered to the small room with the shrine. The door was open. The camping chair had been moved, positioned now to face the empty space where the remains had lain. And on the floor, placed carefully in the center of the room, was a fresh bouquet of yellow roses. For Lisa Chen, who had loved yellow roses, who had worn a yellow scarf on Tuesdays. Gerald Hoffman was mourning them, or saying goodbye, because he knew the police were closing in. Detective Briggs photographed everything, then called Captain Morrison. He came back, his preparing for something, either to run or to finish what he started. They pulled Gerald Hoffman's work records and found another disturbing detail. For the past 5 years, he'd been requesting night shift specifically, working 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., the same shift he'd been working the night the flight attendants disappeared. And according to his schedule, he had the next night off, March 26th. Detective Briggs checked the calendar and felt ice slide down her spine. What's the date tomorrow? Morrison looked at his calendar. His face went white. November 14th. Wait. No. March 26th. But, hold on. No. I need to. He stopped, confused. Actually, it's March 26th, but that's not. He trailed off. Detective Briggs realized a mistake. They'd been so deep in the 1992 investigation that dates were blurring together. But the point remained. Hoffman had requested a rare night off, and the surveillance teams reported he'd been purchasing supplies. Duct tape, rope, plastic sheeting. The kind of supplies you'd need to restrain and transport a victim. We need to move now, Detective Briggs said, before he kills again. But who was his target? The recent photographs in the shrine room showed multiple people. Catherine Morrison, Rachel Chen, David Torres. Others they hadn't identified yet. They couldn't protect everyone. They needed to force Hoffman's hand, make him reveal his plans. Detective Briggs made a decision. We bring in Catherine Morrison. Use her as bait. Morrison's face hardened. That's dangerous. That's exactly why it'll work. Hoffman has been obsessed with these women for 26 years. Catherine represents her sister to him. If we can get him to make contact, to reveal himself, we can catch him in the act. Catherine Morrison sat in the airport police headquarters conference room, listening to Detective Briggs explain the plan. Her face was pale but determined. You want me to draw him out? To make him come after me? We'll have officers surrounding you at all times, Detective Briggs assured her. You'll never be in real danger. We just need him to make a move, to give us probable cause for arrest. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. If it means catching the person who killed Jennifer, I'll do it. They set it up carefully. Catherine would visit the memorial site in Terminal C the next evening, March 26th. She'd be alone, apparently vulnerable. But plainclothes officers would be positioned throughout the terminal. Surveillance cameras would track every movement. The moment Hoffman approached her, they'd move in. But Gerald Hoffman was smarter than they'd anticipated. Because while they were setting up their trap, he was setting up his own. March 26th arrived with gray skies and cold wind. Catherine Morrison drove to the airport that evening, her heart pounding, trying not to think about what could go wrong. She parked in the visitor lot and made her way into Terminal C. The memorial site was a small plaque near Gate C-47, marking where Jennifer and her crew had been scheduled to depart on their final flight. Catherine had installed it 5 years earlier, paying for it herself when the airport administration showed no interest. She stood in front of the plaque, reading the names etched in bronze. Jennifer Morrison, Lisa Chen, Maria Santos, Rebecca Walsh. Forever in our hearts. She could feel eyes watching her. Hoped they belonged to the police officers who were supposed to be protecting her. She stood there for 15 minutes. 20. 30. No one approached. No one seemed to pay any attention to her at all. Maybe Hoffman wasn't coming. Maybe he'd figured out it was a trap. Maybe they'd scared him off. She was about to signal Detective Briggs that the operation was a failure when her phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. I know what they are trying to do. I know you're working with the police. But they don't understand. I never meant to hurt your sister. I loved her. I loved all of them. Please come to parking garage C, level 3. Come alone. I just want to talk. I want to explain. If you bring the police, I'll disappear and you'll never know the truth about what happened to Jennifer. Catherine's hands shook as she read the message. She should call Detective Briggs immediately. Should follow the plan. But the message had said the one thing that could make her risk everything. You'll never know the truth about what happened to Jennifer. After 26 years, she was so close to answers. She couldn't let him slip away now. Catherine walked quickly through the terminal, heading for parking garage C. She texted Detective Briggs as she walked. He made contact. Garage C level 3. But I'm going alone. Don't follow until I signal. Before Briggs could respond, Catherine put her phone on silent and slipped it into her pocket. The parking garage was dimly lit, nearly empty at this hour. Her footsteps echoed as she climbed the concrete stairs to level 3. She emerged into a vast space of concrete pillars and parked cars. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Hello? She called out. I'm here. For a moment, nothing. Then a figure stepped out from behind a pillar. Gerald Hoffman looked smaller in person than in his employee photo. Older. More tired. But his eyes were bright with an intensity that made Catherine's skin crawl. Thank you for coming, he said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. I wasn't sure you would. You said you wanted to explain, Catherine managed. About what happened to Jennifer. He nodded slowly. I think about that night every day. November 14th, 1992. I've relived it 1,000 times. Wished I could change it. But I can't. What happened? Catherine asked, taking a step closer. Tell me what happened to my sister. Hoffman's face crumpled with something that might have been grief or might have been practiced remorse. I didn't plan it. You have to understand that. I just wanted to talk to them. To tell them how special they were. How much their kindness meant to me. But they got scared. Your sister tried to call for help. And I panicked. Catherine felt tears burning her eyes. You killed her because she tried to call for help. I never meant to hurt anyone, Hoffman insisted. But once it started, I couldn't stop. And afterward, I couldn't let them be found. Couldn't let anyone know what I'd done. So I hid them. Kept them safe. Visited them. They were the only people who'd ever been kind to me. Even after they were gone, I couldn't let them go. You kept visiting them for 26 years, Catherine said. You created a shrine. You took trophies. That's not love. That's obsession. Hoffman's expression shifted, something dangerous flickering behind his eyes. You sound like the police. Like you're judging me. But you don't understand. None of you understand what it's like to be invisible. To be the person everyone looks through. Your sister smiled at me. She asked how my day was going. Do you know how rare that is? So you killed her for it. Catherine's voice was hard now, anger overriding fear. You murdered 4 innocent women because they were polite to you. I saved someone, Hoffman said suddenly, his voice taking on a strange pride. Rebecca's baby. She was pregnant. Did you know that? I delivered the baby myself. Kept her safe. Raised her. She's alive because of me. Catherine felt the world tilt. Rebecca Walsh had been 3 months pregnant when she disappeared. Are you saying you kept a baby? Hoffman nodded. My daughter, Sarah. She's 25 now. Beautiful. Smart. Everything her mother was. She doesn't know who she really is. Doesn't know what I did. But I gave her a life. That has to count for something. Where is she? Catherine demanded. Where is Rebecca's daughter? Safe, Hoffman said. Somewhere the police will never find her. That's why I needed to see you. To explain. To make you understand before I disappear. You're not going anywhere, a voice said from behind a pillar. Detective Sandra Briggs stepped out, gun drawn. Gerald Hoffman, you under arrest for the murders of Jennifer Morrison, Lisa Chen, Maria Santos, and Rebecca Walsh. Officers emerged from concealment positions throughout the garage level. At least 6 of them, all with weapons trained on Hoffman. The trap had worked after all. Catherine's text had alerted them. They'd followed at a distance, waiting for Hoffman to incriminate himself. And he'd confessed to everything. Hoffman's face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, anger, resignation, then something that might have been relief. He didn't resist as officers moved in to handcuff him. Didn't try to run or fight. He simply stood there as they read him his rights, his shoulders slumping as if a weight had been lifted. What about Sarah? Catherine asked desperately as they led Hoffman away. Where is Rebecca's daughter? Hoffman looked back at her, and for just a moment, his mask cracked completely. She never knew me as anything but her father. When she finds out the truth, it'll destroy her. That's her punishment, not mine. They took him away. Catherine stood in the parking garage, shaking with adrenaline and emotion, Detective Briggs approaching to check on her. You did good, the detective said. You got him talking. Got him to confess. But we need to find the daughter. Where would he keep someone for 25 years? They found the answer in Gerald Hoffman's financial records. A monthly payment to a storage facility in Grand Prairie. Unit 247. The account had been active for 23 years, automatic withdrawals that no one had ever questioned. Within 2 hours, police surrounded the storage facility. The manager opened Unit 247 with shaking hands, not knowing what they'd find inside. But it wasn't a dungeon or a cell. It was a living space, cramped but carefully maintained. A cot with clean bedding. A small refrigerator. Bookshelves filled with novels and textbooks. A desk with a laptop and organized school supplies. On the walls hung photographs. A girl at various ages. At a school play. Accepting an academic award. In a graduation cap and gown. And most recently, a young woman who looked heartbreakingly like Rebecca Walsh. The same dark hair. The same delicate features. The same warm brown eyes. She's real, Detective Briggs whispered. He really kept Rebecca's baby alive. The laptop was still on, password protected but not encrypted. Their tech specialist accessed it within minutes. Found journal entries documenting a life lived in isolation. A life of homeschooling and controlled outings and constant monitoring. But also entries that showed a young woman trying to build something normal. Enrollment records at Dallas County Community College. Psychology classes. Dreams of becoming a counselor. She'd been trying to escape her prison even without knowing it was a prison. Where is she now? Captain Morrison asked. If she's not here, where did Hoffman take her? They found the answer in the browser history. Searches for bus schedules. Maps of other cities. And a recent search for Dallas County Community College class schedules. She's at school, Detective Chen said. She doesn't know anything's wrong. She thinks she's just attending her regular classes while her father runs errands. They found her in a psychology classroom at the Brookhaven campus. 25 years old, taking notes on behavioral conditioning, completely unaware that her entire world was about to shatter. Sarah Hoffman, Detective Briggs said quietly, approaching her after class ended. I need you to come with me. The young woman looked up, confused and frightened. Is my father okay? What's happened? Let's go somewhere private where we can talk. They brought her to a small office. Sat her down. And Detective Briggs did the hardest thing she'd ever done in 26 years of law enforcement. She told the young woman that the man she'd called father her entire life had murdered her mother and 3 other women. That she'd been living in captivity without realizing it. That her real name wasn't Sarah Hoffman. It was Sarah Walsh. Daughter of Rebecca Walsh, who died trying to protect her unborn child from a monster. Sarah's face went through every emotion imaginable. Denial. Horror. Rage. Grief. She looked at the photo of Rebecca that Detective Briggs showed her. Saw her own face reflected back. And something inside her broke and reformed at the same time. I look just like her, she whispered. You do. And your mother loved you. She was excited about becoming a mother. What happened to her wasn't her choice, and it wasn't your fault. The trial took place 4 months later. July 26, 2018. The courtroom was packed with media, family members, and curious onlookers. Gerald Hoffman sat at the defense table, looking smaller and older than his 54 years. He refused to look at Sarah when she took the stand. She testified for 2 hours. described her life in the storage unit. The isolation, the manipulation, the lies. But she also spoke about her mother, about the strength Rebecca had shown in her final moments, about the love that had allowed Sarah to survive even in the womb as her mother died. He told me he loved me, Sarah said, finally looking at Hoffman. But love doesn't imprison. Love doesn't steal. Love doesn't murder. What he felt wasn't love. It was possession. And I refused to be possessed by him anymore. Hoffman's face crumpled. Tears streamed down his cheeks. But Sarah didn't waver. She had found her voice. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. 4 counts of first-degree murder. 1 count of kidnapping. Multiple other charges. Gerald Hoffman was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 25 years. As he was led from the courtroom, he turned one last time to look at Sarah. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. Sarah stood, supported by Catherine Morrison on one side and Rachel Chen on the other. "I forgive you for what you did to me," she said loudly enough for the whole courtroom to hear. "But I will never forgive you for what you took from my mother." 3 months after the trial, on a crisp November morning, Catherine Morrison stood in a small cemetery in Arlington watching as 4 caskets were lowered into the ground side by side. The memorial service had drawn hundreds of people, former colleagues of the flight attendants, investigators who'd worked the case, family members who'd waited 26 years for this moment. Sarah stood beside Catherine, wearing a black dress they'd picked out together. It was one of many firsts for Sarah over the past months. First time in a department store. First time choosing her own clothes. First time making decisions without Gerald Hoffman controlling every aspect of her life. The adjustment had been difficult. Some days Sarah could barely get out of bed, overwhelmed by the reality of what had been done to her. Other days she showed remarkable resilience, determined to build the life she'd been denied. She was living temporarily with Catherine while working with therapists to process her trauma. And slowly, painfully, she was learning what it meant to be free. The minister concluded the service with a prayer. People began to disperse. Rachel Chen approached them, her eyes red from crying. "Lisa would have wanted to know you," Rachel said to Sarah, touching her arm gently. "She was always the nurturing one. She would have been a wonderful aunt." "I wish I could have known all of them," Sarah said softly. As the crowd thinned, Detective Sandra Briggs made her way over. She had been instrumental in helping Sarah navigate the legal challenges of establishing a new identity, accessing education, beginning to build an independent life. "The prosecutor wanted me to let you know the investigation is complete. We found evidence connecting Hoffman to 3 other missing persons cases. All women who worked at the airport. All disappeared over the years. We'll probably never know the full extent of his crimes, but at least these families will have some closure." Sarah nodded, processing this information. 7 victims at minimum. Possibly more that were never reported or connected. The scope of Gerald Hoffman's crimes was staggering. After Detective Briggs left, Catherine and Sarah walked together among the headstones. Jennifer's new grave marker was simple but elegant. "Beloved daughter, sister, and friend. Forever in flight." "Tell me about her," Sarah said. "Tell me what she was like." Catherine smiled, memories flooding back. "She was fearless. When we were kids, I was always the cautious one. But Jennifer would climb the highest trees, explore the darkest parts of the woods behind our house. She wanted to see everything, experience everything. That's why she became a flight attendant. That was part of it. But she also loved people. She had this gift for making everyone feel special. Passengers would request her flight specifically because she remembered their names, asked about their families. They sat on a bench near the graves and Catherine continued sharing stories. Jennifer teaching her to ride a bike. Jennifer defending her from bullies in middle school. Jennifer calling every week from whatever city she'd landed in, always making time for family. "She would have fought for you," Catherine said. "If she'd known what was going to happen, if she'd had any chance to protect you and your mother, she would have." Detective Briggs said they all tried to protect each other, Sarah replied. In his confession, Hoffman said Maria threw herself in front of Lisa when he attacked. Jennifer tried to use her radio to call for help even after she was injured. They were heroes. Sarah pulled something from her pocket. A small photograph that Detective Briggs had retrieved from evidence. It showed Rebecca Walsh in her flight attendant uniform, smiling at the camera, one hand resting on her barely visible baby bump. She was so young, Sarah whispered. Only 23. But Rachel told me she was excited about me. That she'd already picked out nursery colors, had names selected. She couldn't wait to be a mother. Tears slipped down Sarah's cheeks. He took that from both of us. He took everything. Catherine wrapped an arm around her shoulders. He took the past, but we have the future. We have each other. Over the following months, Sarah began to find her footing. She enrolled in college officially, this time under her legal name, Sarah Walsh, which she'd chosen to honor her mother. She made friends cautiously, still learning how to navigate social relationships after a lifetime of isolation. She also began volunteering with an organization that helped victims of kidnapping and long-term captivity. Her unique perspective and hard-won strength made her a powerful advocate for others who had survived similar ordeals. Catherine watched her transformation with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Sarah would never get back the childhood that had been stolen from her. Would never know the mother who had died trying to protect her. But she was building something new. Something her own. 5 years passed. November 14th, 2023. Sarah Walsh stood at a podium in the main terminal of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Behind her, a bronze memorial had been unveiled featuring the names and photographs of Jennifer Morrison, Lisa Chen, Maria Santos, and Rebecca Walsh. The inscription read, "In memory of 4 dedicated flight attendants who lost their lives in service. May their courage and kindness never be forgotten." Sarah, now 30 years old, had earned her degree in psychology. She worked as a counselor specializing in trauma recovery. Around her neck hung a gold cross necklace that had belonged to her mother, returned to her from the evidence locker. 5 years ago, Sarah began, her voice carrying across the crowd that had gathered. I learned the truth about my origins. It was the most devastating and liberating moment of my life. Devastating because I discovered the depth of evil that exists in the world. Liberating because I also discovered the strength of love and resilience. Catherine Morrison sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face, but smiling. Beside her were Rachel Chen, Captain Frank Morrison, who had finally found the answers that had haunted him for decades, and Detective Sandra Briggs. All of them had become important figures in Sarah's life. My mother, Rebecca Walsh, was 23 years old when she died. She was excited about becoming a mother. She had dreams for her future. All 4 of these women had dreams, had families who loved them, had so much life left to live. She paused, gathering her emotions. Gerald Hoffman tried to erase them. He tried to make their deaths invisible, their lives forgotten. But he failed. Because we remember. We honor them. We carry them forward. Sarah gestured to the memorial behind her. This monument stands as a reminder that evil may hide in plain sight, but truth will eventually surface. Justice may be delayed, but it will prevail. And love, even love that seems lost forever, finds a way to endure. As she concluded her speech, airport employees released 4 white doves into the terminal's soaring atrium. The birds circled once, then flew toward the windows and the bright Texas sky beyond. Symbols of freedom. Symbols of spirits finally at rest. After the ceremony, Sarah walked with Catherine to the lower levels of Terminal C, the section where the maintenance tunnel had been. The area had been completely renovated, transformed into a bright modern space. A small plaque on the wall marked where the bodies had been discovered, but the darkness had been driven out by light and memory. Do you ever regret it? Catherine asked. Learning the truth? Some people might prefer not to know. Sarah considered the question. The truth was painful. It still is. But it set me free. I'm not living in a storage unit anymore. Not physically or emotionally. I'm building the life my mother wanted for me. They stood together in silence, honoring the space where so much tragedy had unfolded. Where 4 women had lost their lives and 1 small girl had, against all odds, survived. Your mother would be proud of you, Catherine said softly. So would your sister, Sarah replied. As they made their way back to the terminal, Sarah thought about the long journey from that storage unit to this moment. The therapy sessions. The night maze. The slow process of learning to trust and to hope. It hadn't been easy. Some days it still wasn't. But she had survived. And more than that, she had found purpose in her pain. Every person she helped heal from trauma, every survivor she counseled through their darkest moments, was a testament to her mother's strength and the love that had sustained Sarah even when she didn't know its source. Outside the airport, Sarah paused to look up at the planes taking off into the November sky, each one carrying passengers to new destinations, new lives. She thought about her mother's love of flying, of seeing the world from above. "I'm going to travel," Sarah announced suddenly. "I've spent my whole life in one place. It's time to see the world." Catherine smiled. "Where will you go first?" Sarah thought about it, remembering stories about her mother's planned routes. "Seattle. That's where Flight 447 was supposed to go. I want to complete that journey for them. For all of them." "Then that's where you'll go," Catherine said. "And I'll come with you if you want company." "I'd like that very much." As they walked to the parking garage, Sarah felt the weight of the past settling into something she could carry. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but integrated into who she was becoming. She was Sarah Walsh, daughter of Rebecca Walsh, survivor, counselor, advocate. She was the living legacy of 4 women who had walked into an airport one November night and never walked out. But their story didn't end in that dark tunnel. It continued in Sarah, in the memorial that would stand for generations, in the justice that had finally been served. The vanished crew had been found. The darkness had been brought to light. And life, precious and fragile and beautiful, went on. Sarah looked back one last time at the airport terminal, at the place that held so much pain, and now so much meaning. The bronze memorial gleaming inside. The names of 4 women who deserved to be remembered. Jennifer Morrison, Lisa Chen, Maria Santos, Rebecca Walsh, forever in flight. Then she climbed into Catherine's car, ready to move forward, carrying her mother's memory like wings. If this story moved you, if you believe that justice matters no matter how long it takes, subscribe to Ultimate Crime Stories. We bring you investigations that shine light into the darkest places, that give voice to victims who can no longer speak for themselves, and that prove the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the surface. Because some mysteries demand to be solved, some voices demand to be heard, and some stories, like this one, demand to be told.